Count Julius Productions.
Hello there, everyone. How are you doing today? Not scared enough? Well, today we're going to be reading Pokemon Lost Silver. If you enjoy this kind of content, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and I would very much appreciate that. And without any further ado, let's let the horror begin. You see, I am a single college student living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver here in the States. I have purposely locked myself out of all media on the internet side. For school purposes. That means no 4chan, no /v/ and no Bulbapedia, etc. As I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on its launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take about a week for it to arrive. I decided that during that time, I would replay my crystal version on my Game Boy Color. However, I realized that long ago, my mom threw it away because I told her the save went dead. And I was very upset about it then. She also threw away my silver version, so all I have is my Game Boy Color. As such, I set out to GameStop and bought a used silver version, as it's the only Pokemon game they had left for the Game Boy Color. $10, fairly cheap. I went home and started it up for a nostalgia trip. However, that's where things started getting bizarre, and most likely the reason why you read this. The Game Freak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the card was just errored or something. So I turned it off and on. The same thing happened. I tried pressing the start button, over and over, and all the buttons. Eventually the logo vanished, and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than the usual menu screen, I was already in the game in a previous saved file. Which was odd, I was expecting all the other cards to be wiped of the poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining. I would have chosen the continue option to see what the previous guy did anyways. First off, I clicked his trainer information. His name was just ... He didn't have much originality. I checked his profile and apparently he had 999 hours and 99 minutes put in the game with all 16 badges, 99999 Pokédollars, and all 201 Pokemon on the Pokédex. Seeing as he apparently had Mew and Celebi logged also, I'm guessing he either used a Game Genie or was a really hardcore Pokemon player back then. I checked his Pokemon to see what a bad butt team he had. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and the 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I'm thinking that this must be a cruel joke by the person who last played the game, but I decided to check the profiles of those Pokemon anyways. As I expected, there were different letters of unknown, all level 5. I was a bit shaky with all my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the word spelled out to be leave. As for the 6th Pokemon, it turned out to be a Cyndaquil. Mind you, This is before there were individualized Pokemon icons. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but it was level 5 with only 1 HP left, and only 2 attacks, Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that despite my having my volume at max, none of the Pokemon had their usual cries, just pure, unadulterated silence. Having enough of the team, I closed it. I was parked at what appears to be in a room inside Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason there were no NPCs around. Even more eerie is the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, as if it was just leaning on its side. There was no music at all. There's no exit or ladder, at least I thought there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes, but couldn't seem to find a way out. This is certainly not a room I've seen in the Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There weren't any wild Pokemon there either. Finally, I managed to find the ladder, which turned out to be beside the pillar. The screen turned black and the music finally started playing. I had a sudden chill as I recognized that melody. I heard to be the tune you hear when you finally listen to the radio at the elf ruins where the unknown are at. I immediately realized that there wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room and would need flash. Before I took care of that though, I immediately checked my gear to change the radio to something more pleasant, but it turns out there was no radio card, or even a phone or time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold ... from earlier, I will call him Gold from now on, was just walking in a mist of black. I recall that Cyndaquil had flash, so I turned off my Pokegear and made Cyndaquil use flash. I didn't see any message saying hurry and use flash or anything like that. The room just became lit just like that, and I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red, with a linear gray path heading south. The ladder I used to go up to down was not there at all. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made, until I finally made it to the end, which appears to be a sign. I read the sign which said turn back now. Suddenly I was asked to answer yes or no, but there was no question asked. I chose yes and did not know what it was asking, and the screen went black again, making a ladder climb sound. The unknown radio music stopped, and in a few seconds was replaced by not as creepy pokey flute radio music. It was another dark room, but I held my breath and used flash again. Suddenly it said that Hurry had fainted, which was odd since I recall there were no status conditions like poison on him, and I clearly wasn't in a battle. I checked my Pokemon quickly, but suddenly he's no longer in my party or with us. In fact, after a bit of investigating, none of my Pokemon are there, but instead all were replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing before I spelled out the unknown. Then my team of unknown spelled, he died. Either way, after all that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appeared to be only 4 squares big. The walls of the room were gray bricks, as if I was hiding inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appeared to be a bunch of graves, similar to the ones from Pokemon Red and Blue. about that room and pressed the A, but nothing happened. I've already concluded this was a clearly hacked game, and some sadistic F sold at GameStop. However, my only curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of ... again, only to find out that the spread of gold was missing his arms. He also appears to be less smug, but rather seems more sad and empty in the way that I do. Not know how to describe. For some reason, it also is now said he has 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimless wandering, my character suddenly spun around through the escape rope spinning animation. Instead of flying up though, my character spun downward slowly as if sinking. After that scream, the music stopped. After finally landing, the overworld spread of gold is colored very differently now. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appears completely white now, including his skin, as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games, placed into a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his profile, and now, while his overworld sprite, he lost his legs and what appears to be bloody tears from his eyes. It also says he now has 32 badges, which now starts to disturb me, as this change of number seems to represent something important. I also checked him with Pokemon, which this time contains 5 unknown and a level 100 Celebi without a nickname. The unknown are this time level 15 and spelled out dying. I checked the Celebi's profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except it was only one half the sprite. 1 leg, 1 arm, 1 eye. It only has 1 attack, Perish Song. The area I was in was the Sprout Tower with the immobile pillar as before, except everything is apparently red now. I walked north what felt like forever. Eventually I finally encountered some generic man and woman NPC. They were all lined up to the side, just facing the long, slantish pillar in the middle. They were also white, and nothing happens when I try to speak to them. I kept going north until eventually the pillar finally appears chopped off, with a transparent red in the spot. I went up to red without even pressing the A. I was suddenly engaged and finally in a battle. The music starts again, from which it sounds like the unknown radio music again, but played backwards. Gold's battle back sprite matches his front one with the bloody eyes and white skin and lack of arms, while red sprite was the same as in GSC except transparent. The text simply said "wants the battle," as if he had no name. And both of us only had 1 Pokemon each, which was weird as I swore I only had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out conveniently with half a sprite for the back sprite also. The shiny noise and animation was different, as the sounds it made sound like much more screech attacks used consecutively. Red sent out a seemingly normal male Pikachu, except he is level 255, and his sprite seems sad as tears in his eyes. Rather than the usual fight item Pokemon Run menu, I was only given the option to use attacks. Since Celebi is the only one, I chose it. Naturally, since Pikachu was level 255, he went first. Pikachu used Curse, lowering his speed, increasing his other stats. I'm not even sure if Pikachu could use Curse. Celebi used Perish Song. In 3 turns, both Pokemon KO'd. Not like I have a choice. At this point, I didn't even go back to the fight menu, as the battle just continued without me. And note there were no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu used Flail, which didn't do much damage, but despite his level up boost, as his health was maxed. Celebi used Perish Song. Nothing happens as it was already used. Pikachu used Restoration, which did a butt ton of damage, knocking Celebi down to less than 10 HP. Celebi used Pain Split, which surprised me as Celebi didn't even have that attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu have about 150 HP. Pikachu used Weed Look, not like that did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, my Celebi fainted. He said in the text, it said, Celebi has died. And instead of an ordinary drop-off during the screen animation, the Celebi black sprite just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up, even with the Perish Song didn't count as my loss. Pikachu used one more different attack beyond his 5 attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards, said Pikachu has died with a slow fade out animation. Apparently, I was the winner as transparent red sprite showed up and said ... At that point, I freaked out as the transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The battle then ended at that point and faded out along with the music. I'm back in the overworld with another change to the gold sprite. He's now as transparent as Red's overworld sprite. I quickly checked Gold's profile, which this time the only thing that remains of him is his head, with transparent skin. His head was zoomed in a bit, showing a black void in his eyes. It now stated that he has 40 badges. I then backed down and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown, which then spelled out no more. I was at what I now know is the next to the end. There was apparently no music playing, but then for some reason I still felt like something was there that could be heard. I was back in my room in New Barktown. Maybe I finally get to play this game properly, but who am I kidding? I knew that sadistic F must have done something. I walked around my room to interact with things as I'm a bit afraid to go downstairs and see what is waiting down there. No, I said walked as while the background was moving. Gold was not moving, his transparent limbs were all doing so just floated there like the ghost you see from Diamond and Pearl. As expected, the radio, computer, and TV did not work, so I had no choice but to go down the stairs. I ended up in the same lower room of my house. Everything appears normal, except the mom isn't home. After failing to interact with anything in this room, I decide to go outside. To my surprise, the door leading outside to the south doesn't work, and instead I just walk straight through it to a void. I continued moving south to see what the F was going on. My house vanishes as it heads south into the void. It was creepy as when I entered the void, the outline on Gold's transparent sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually I reached a white area and Gold's sprite turned back and transparent again. I continued south without thinking of stopping at all. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's regular sprite. I talked to it. He said, "Goodbye. Forever." notably with the space in between the forever and ... and vanished. As that happened, it said ... used nightmare. At that point, I would not deny that being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation sequence and slowly going downwards like before. I'm now back in the small hollowed out room surrounded by graves earlier. Or at least I was saying back there, as there's no spread anymore. I tried to walk around but nothing moved. Not even wall bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile. With absolutely no gold sprite left, it said I have 0 badges. And all the pictures of the Johto gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokemon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, it spelled out a phrase that I dared to read. I'm dead. As soon as I went back to the overworld, the room I supposedly was in was covered with the same blocks as the walls. Then I figured out exactly what the room was when the final text said RIP. That room was a big grave surrounded by other graves. Gold has already been dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges, attempts at becoming a Pokemon master, still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death. And his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation. I was unable to escape from that text no matter what I pressed. I tried resetting the game and the same thing happened. At which I then decided to finally give up on that horrible nightmare. After that experience, I will never look at a gimmick unknown in the same way again. That's, they say, the only first generation of folk tales and legends, but the second generation have shown me how unpleasant the truth can be. I eventually enjoyed Soul Silver immensely, but I still can't think what that rigged game has told me.
There are tons of stories out there about hacked Pokemon games. Some of them are really quite neat, such as the one about a version where you get a ghost as a starter. Some are absolutely ridiculous, silly stories about individuals dying after playing a game, or the game talking to them. God, don't these writers know that less is more when it comes to these stories? Oh well, I digress. I grew interested in these hacked games that are apparently in any thrift store, on eBay, or handed out by homeless people to random passerby. I don't have the pleasure of meeting these creepy people. I merely found this particular cartridge in a trash bin when the garbage truck backed into my neighbor's dumpster. I noticed the game and asked the trash man if I could take it, and he didn't seem to mind. It was thrown away after all. I, of course, checked with my neighbor to confirm if they actually didn't want it, though they seemed perplexed, as if they'd never seen it in their life. Their son made a grab for it, a little boy who saw Charizard on the cover crying out, "Pokemon! I want, Mommy!" But his mother told him no, seeing as I found it. He didn't even have a Game Boy anyway, he just liked Pokemon. Thinking nothing more, I simply went home, looking at the cartridge's sticker on the way. Just a plain old red version. The sticker torn slightly across Charizard's neck, but that was expected with such an old game. I had blue version as a kid, so I was a bit eager to see it, the albeit minimal differences red version had. I was rather disappointed by what I saw when the title screen showed up. Pokemon. Strangled red version. Well, damn it. It was a hack. Hacks were neat and all, but they had zero monetary value. The original is quite valuable by now, and I wanted to play red anyway. Not this crap. Oh well, it was free. Might as well try it. The name was odd, however. Strangled Red? That made no sense. Not even in a morbid description of someone being asphyxiated, as some people term blue when choking, not red. Who knows, maybe there was a pair of these hacks and I was just getting the red one. The more I thought about this though, the more interested I became. My initial disappointment turned into curiosity. I wanted to know what the creator had made, and I was going to know everything I saw. The first oddity I noticed was the start screen had a Charizard next to the trainer, instead of a Charmander. Also, the Pokemon never cycled through like an original version did. It just stayed Charizard. Even after 5 minutes of waiting. Shrugging, I hit start. Noticing there was no Charizard cries I did, like there was supposed to be. I saw that there was a continue option, so I figured I'd do what anyone did with used games and see what the previous owner had done. No. I blinked in surprise. No? What do you mean no? The game wouldn't let me continue no matter what. Though, on the 4th attempt, I heard the Charizard cry. Quiet and barely audible. But there, shrugging it off, I decided to just hit new game. Like I would have done after checking the old file anyway. The screen cut to black for a while. No Professor Oak, no starting theme, nothing at all. Eventually the screen came back, showing a bedroom, 2 beds, 2 TVs, and a computer in the corner. My trainer sprite was the usual one, consistent with the original red version. I was curious as to why it didn't ask my name. Though, that was answered as I opened the pause menu, noticing that my trainer name was Steven. No, this isn't my real name, or some stupid crap like that. The game isn't self-aware or haunted, at least not that I know of. It just had a name chosen already. Curious, I saw that he had the starter amount of money. No badges. He didn't look like Red though. His hair was longer, almost reaching halfway down his back. Red's usual smile replaced with a confident smirk. Honestly, I found this sprite much cooler than Red. Next, I checked out the Pokemon. A single Charmander, level 5, named Miki. Nothing was odd about it. Or should I say her? With the name and all? She had a beginning Charmander stats. Only knew Scratch and Tail Whip, basic stuff. The game seemed relatively normal. Returning to the game, I walked about the room, noticing Steven's long hair was present on the back of my trainer sprite when my back was turned to the camera. I didn't recognize the house, but I descended the stairs to see more. Downstairs was another trainer, who spoke to me the instant I came down. Mike. Ready yet? Steven. Yeah. I assumed this Mike was my rival. Pre-decided for me. As a replacement of Blue, most likely. Though I thought back to the bedroom having 2 beds, realizing they weren't just rivals. They were brothers. They talked back and forth. Basic Pokemon dialogue. Become a Pokemaster, catch 'em all, stuff like that. Before having a little argument over which is better, Charmander or Squirtle. Like the one versus Blue in the lab. Simple enough, scratch, tackle, till I won purely for having the first turn. I took note of how much better Steven's sprite looked in combat than Red's. A different pose, his hair looking like it was blowing in the wind. Minor upgrade, but still, much nicer. I left the house after some more banter with my brother. Stepping out to Pallet Town theme. Going to the east, I found this town was indeed Pallet Town. The house was simply on the outskirts in the west. I noted there was no mysterious grassy field like in normal Pallet Town. Wandering about, I decided to check in on Red's home. His mother was inside, and when I talked to her, she commented on how handsome Stephen looked, hoping her son would look up to him as a role model for when he became a trainer himself next year. Which of course led me to realize this game took place a year before the original Pokemon. Red was even upstairs, playing an SNES in his room commenting, "I'm gonna be the best too when it's my turn." I was starting to like this hack. It was interesting. A completely new adventure. A different character. Hell, Steven even seemed to have a history with the people in this town. A reputation. A personality beyond a silent protagonist. The people in town talked to him as a person, making conversation, not just spouting tutorial crap. Even Blue's sister had new dialogue. They seemed to be a relationship too, as the dialogue ended with a kiss and a heart over his head. Professor Oak simply wished me well, giving me a Pokédex to aid in my adventure. He wasn't giving it to me to be the reason behind the adventure, like every other Pokemon game out there. He gave it to me out of kindness. Something to help me on my way. A gift. I was liking this more and more with each second. The game seemed to have an actual story now. I was somebody, not just a cookie-cutter protagonist anyone could be, not just some blank sheet that could be replaced without notice. The story was different, though the actual gameplay remained unchanged. I went north like I was supposed to. I went from town to town, collected badges, received the praise of the leaders. Steven's fame even seemed to spread, as some NPCs would talk like they knew him. I used Miki for every battle, and she was growing surprisingly fast. She handled Brock with ease, even pounded Misty with no trouble at all. She wasn't as adversely affected by super effective attacks as others, did more damage than a regular Charmander. She was a veritable powerhouse. She even became a Charizard at the mere level of 25. Not bad at all, I must say. Things started to get weird though as soon as I reached Lavender Town. I know. Lavender Town is the focus behind every creepy story, and the like. But it was the only place that was noticeably different. There was no Team Rocket invasion, which I found odd. Though I did remember this was a year in the past, so the invasion wouldn't occur until Red's time. I tried to enter the Pokemon Tower, aiming to get a Ghastly. But that's when it gets odd. "I have no reason to be here," Steven said. Steven wouldn't go into Pokemon Tower, no matter what I did. This was weird. I mean, hell, there are a million places in Kanto you really have no need to be. Little random houses with nothing but children's NPCs, for example. Why was it here that Steven wouldn't enter? With a shrug, I figured I wouldn't need a Ghastly, seeing as Mickey could handle anything, so I simply went on my way. Lavender Town serving no purpose other than a passageway with a Poké Center. The game progressed normally from there. The remaining gyms fell, and eventually I made my way to the Elite Four and defeated them. As with Blue, my brother, Mike, was there before me, initiating the championship battle, which Mickey swept with ease. The aftermath of the battle was quite pleasant. None of the tension that was present between Red and Blue at the end of the match. The brothers congratulated each other on their progress, and shook hands, before the screen went white. No Hall of Fame, no credits. Steven, I don't want to. Mike, come on. I just gotta borrow her for a second to finish the Pokédex. The entry won't register unless she recognizes me as master for a second. Steven, but she's my Miki. I promise I'll give her back. Come on, please? Yes or no. I was a bit perplexed, so I hit no to be cautious. Mike, come on, please? No. Come on, please? I realized this would simply continue to loop until I hit yes. So I did to see what would happen. Mike, alright, this will take a sec. Then we'll both be Pokemasters. Steven. ... The screen changed. The animation shown when two people trade Pokemon, which I found a bit weird, seeing as I was solo, but whatever. This was what is apparently supposed to happen. Miki went first. I watched lazily as she began to travel down the trading tube. Snap! That baby jump. The sudden noise resonating in my silent bedroom. Loud due to the volume being way up. Looking at the screen, I noticed the game had seemed to freeze. Miki still in mid-trade, but the game wasn't doing anything. With a sigh, I just turned off the game, wondering when my last save was. When the game turned back on, I stared for a moment at the start screen. There was no Charizard next to the trader. Upon pressing start, I saw the new game option was absent, leaving only continue. This was strange, to say the least. So I selected it, the game starting without even showing my stats as usual. My jaw dropped when I saw what I was greeted with. 1 year later, the Lavender Town theme came first, playing its normal way. The screen slowly fading in from blackness. Steven was in Pokemon Tower. As seeing as the tower had its own theme. He was standing in front of a tombstone, not doing anything. Wondering what was going on, I pressed A. Steven... ... Confused, I tried walking, realizing I was indeed in control of the moment. I brought up the pause menu and checked my party. Miki was gone. Not just Miki. All my Pokemon. He had nothing. The Pokédex was absent from the menu. His bag was empty. Honestly concerned now, I checked his trainer card. He had no money. He had no badges. His playtime was 8.795 hours, which was impossible as I had only had 30 logged in before. But that wasn't the strangest part. His picture, the picture of the handsome, confident young trainer was different. His eyes were blank. His face turned slightly down. That smirk of his was gone, replaced by a lack of any expression at all. That long hair of his, before in a perfect perm, was now messy and unkempt. I couldn't look at him anymore, closing the menu. I went to move out of the tower, but with every step I took away from the tombstone, the screen flickered, like it did when a Pokemon was poisoned. Gulping, I brought up the trainer card again. His picture was getting worse. Every step I took, he hung his head more and more. His shoulders slumped. He bent over. By the time I had exited the tower, he was on his knees, hands to his face, hair draped across him. I had guessed already what was going on, but this cinched it. I began to put some things together in my mind. I had always wondered why there was no champion in the original games besides your rival. Why is it you, the protagonist, had to beat your rival when he had just waltzed in, no previous champion to challenge? Then it struck me. The answer was right here. The previous champion has given up. His precious Miki was apparently dead, and with her, so died part of him. His Pokédex, the other Pokemon, his badges, his fame, all of it. He threw it away in that year. The year that I missed. The year where all those hours came from. I even did the math. This is 8,675 hours in a year. Add that to my 30 from before and it matched up. Even so, the game kept going. This should have been an ending, I thought. I mean, what else was there to do? I had no Pokédex, no Pokemon, no anything. What am I supposed to be doing? I talked to people in the town, but they all said similar things. Are you okay? Still mourning, I see. Everything will be alright. Please, is there anything we can do? Steven never replied to any of them, and they all simply said the same things over and over. I couldn't put the game down now. This was so strange. Curious, I headed off into the tall grass, and eventually got into a battle through Rattata. No Pokemon was sent out, just Steven's sprite. I was wondering how I battled. Wild Rattata left you be. The battle ended without anything happening. This was certainly interesting, and it happened with every Pokemon I encountered. Wild Pidgey ignored you. Wild Ponytail wandered off. The music never changed either, no matter where I went. Lavender Town came from the speakers, following me. Sometimes slowed down slightly, sometimes not. I searched everywhere, every town, talked to everybody, wondering what the hell I needed to do. My frustration was mixing with the depressing atmosphere of all of this, making the experience altogether unnerving and uncomfortable. But I couldn't tear myself away. I was starting to get a bit angry though. Nobody telling me anything besides giving me their condolences and trying to give me items like lemonade or coffee, each met with no. I slapped myself for idiocy, suddenly realizing how likely answer was right in front of me. Pallet Town, of course. When I went there though, which took a long time having to walk. No Pokemon to fly with, no bicycle to ride, and Steven only seemed to move half the regular movement speed. It wasn't much different. I first tried talking to Professor Oak. These things happen, you were just unlucky. Next I tried Blue Sister. Please, don't leave home again. Red's mom wouldn't even talk to me at all. With nowhere else in mind to go, I walked to the west, finding the house from the beginning, which I had never entered since leaving Pallet Town. Inside was Mike, but talking to him was just as useless. Mike, I'm so sorry. I pondered for a moment if there really was the ending. Steven doomed to do nothing but roam Kanto in misery, haunted by the memories, forced to listen to everyone's concerns about him, as a last-ditch effort to do anything. I went to the bedroom and walked over the bed. Steven, I'm going to sleep. The screen faded to black for a moment, but then slowly faded back in, the world having a black tint to it. The Mike sprite was laying in the other bed, and I assumed this meant it was night. Steven, I'm going to do it. Do what? Again, I had no idea. Tried inspecting everything in the room. Nothing happened. As soon as I left the house, another dialogue. It can bring her back. It can do anything. What in the hell was it? Something that could do anything? I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Wandering about, I tried to leave Pallet Town the usual way. Steven, not that way. He wouldn't go any further. I tried the homes. Steven, screw them. I quirked my eyebrow at that, forgetting for a moment that this was not a real Pokemon game. The vulgarity of it just took me off guard. I continued to look around, but there was nowhere I could go, until I accidentally stepped on the upper half of the ocean. And Steven walked right in. The only upper half of the sprite visible, like the swimmers you encounter in Cerulean Gym. I didn't know you could just swim. Steven, the missing one. Missing one? I paused for a moment. No, you couldn't possibly mean that. I hadn't tried the missing no trick on this hack yet, but it just fit too well. It just had to be what he meant. I surfed all the way towards Cinnabar. I began to feel something was off, more so than it already was. Silence. The Lavender Town theme had stopped. There was no noise at all, nor was there any Pokemon. I just kept going, finding Cinnabar and surfing up and down the East Coast. Lo and behold, Wild Missing No had appeared. Mine, said Stephen. Wild Missing No was caught. What the hell? Stephen didn't do anything. He just commanded that atrocity of broken data to join him. No, become his possession. And it did. I was getting more and more disturbed by this all. Checking the start menu. I saw the Missing No was not in my party, but instead as an item. Making things even stranger, I checked the trainer card as well. Stephen has his back to me. His long hair draped behind him. His hand remembering what he said. At the start of the night, I realized what I had to do. I surfed the land and made my way northeast to... where else? Lavender Town. Along the way, I noticed all the traders, oddly still out at this hour, wouldn't look at Stephen, all of them turning when he passed, even those that were normally static. I tried talking to one of the officers of the guardhouse type buildings. Officer said, "Just go." They all said the same thing, though one sent chills down my spine. Sometimes dead is best. My hands were sweating at this point. Stephen was about to try the impossible, something someone would see as a crime against nature, which many of these people shared that opinion. I steeled myself. It's just a game, and I was going to complete it. It took an eternity to reach Pokemon Tower, but I got there eventually, taking a deep breath and heading towards the tombstone. I remembered which one, the image of Steve standing before it, was burned into my mind after all. First, I tried inspecting it. Stephen said, "Mickey." Nothing happened. With a gulp, I opened the menu and selected Missing No from my bag. Oak. "Stephen, don't use it!" I was reminded of when Professor Oak would magically tell you that you couldn't use the key item somewhere, like when you used the bicycle in a building. Though the message this time is different. Even worse. Stephen responded to it. "In a world that cheated me, why should I play fair?" Stephen used it. ... Stephen attained The language was indecipherable. What in God's name did I obtain? I couldn't tell you, because the game took away my control. Without my input, Stephen began to leave the tower on his own, walking single step by single step. The Lavender Town theme started again, as he left the tower and began his excruciatingly long journey against my will. Every time he crossed one of those borders, where the music would change, it got progressively slower, more and more disturbing. By the time he reached Cerulean City, it was a demonic rumbling. I just stared, watching him, trying to guess where he was going. But it was getting more and more obvious. He was heading to Pallet Town. The music had all but stopped when he got there, playing single note by single note. He went exactly where I had guessed, right into his own house, inside and up the stairs. At this point, there was no music. Stephen moved step by step, stopping at his brother's bed, turning to face him. At first, I thought the game froze. He didn't do anything. He simply stood there, and I couldn't move him. I did, however, find out I could open the pause menu. I was terrified to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I selected his trainer card. There was a low growl noise, like a distorted Pokemon cry. Stephen was looking at me again, directly at the screen. He was hunched over, bangs obscuring his face. His hair was wild and feathered out. Between his bangs, there wasn't even a face at all, just black. 2 red eyes looking straight forward, a white grin contrasting with the darkness. That wasn't all. His name was now Sleven. I couldn't look away, my eyes glued to his. Not breaking contacts for some time. My vision was getting blurry until I couldn't see well. My face grew wet. I was crying like a baby. There was nothing I could do to hold back the tears. I was with this boy from the start. I built him up to greatness, and was then forced to watch his decline after a tragic accident. And now, he was this thing, this abomination. I watched him go insane. Halting my tears, wiping my eyes, I closed out the trainer card and tried to save the game, wanting just to quit. The game informed me this was impossible. Nothing can be saved now. The pause menu wouldn't close no matter what I did, so with no other option I checked the bag. Nothing happened. I checked Pokemon, and there was one. A single sprite met me. It had 0 HP, its status dead, its name $#. I selected it and was greeted with 4 options. Status: it's her. Switch: never. Close: no. And strangle. My fingers shaking, I selected strangle, and the menu closed, showing Steven in the room again. Steven said, "Goodbye." Snap! Oh boy. The game shut itself off. I was more dumbfounded than frightened. In a bit of shock, I turned it back on. The title screen showing me a Mannix, Steven, and a horribly glitched Charizard. I pressed start, then continue. All I saw was a zoomed out view of Pallet Town, showing Steven's home to the west, tall grass surrounding it, those unmovable stones blocking it from the rest of the town. The image was completely static. No music, no movement. Before fading to white, going back to the title screen. It was as it had been when I first popped in. A trainer and a Charizard. I then attempted to continue, and as it had done in the beginning, it said no.
I remember living on the streets. That I remember. Exactly how that came to be is still unclear. But I know that one way or another it was because of my parents. I hated them. Hate them with the little memory of them I have left. Flashes of pure terror. Like being beaten bloody on my 6th birthday. And being trapped in a closet for weeks at a time with little interaction and even less food. This is how I remember life with my parents. The only food I ever got was dog chow. Tuna meant for cats if I tried to be bold. I don't remember if it was a pet or a sibling, but there was something that they loved more than me. Something that always got all the attention. What it was doesn't matter now. I've seen horror all my life. I lived on the streets for a while. I think it came up 2 years ago, but it could have been more. It felt like a lifetime. Sleeping on playgrounds and benches, stealing or eating out of trash bags just to survive. I was about 11 when Alice picked me up. She found me, cradled in the fetal position, behind a dumpster between 2 buildings, the names of which I couldn't read. I was just skin and bone back then. She said I had blood on me, but whether or not it was mine, I still don't remember. I was in shock from something. That's when I met her. When Alice took me in, she promised a new way of life. She promised a family, love and nurturing. But most of all, she promised food. Real food. She took me to her car and drove me up to the manor where she lived. I do remember that she didn't actually drive. We sat in the back of a long black car with slick red interior leather as an old man wearing a little hat drove me to my new home. The building reminded me of a haunted mansion I saw in a movie once when I snuck into the theater. I've never eaten so much popcorn before in my life. People just left it all over the floor, and nobody else was trying to get it. I don't remember what the movie was, but it made me not want to go back into that building. I screamed, I cried, I punched the driver in the eye. But through the soothing mystique of Alice's welcoming voice, I was coaxed inside. Whilst under the spell of her sweet voice and intoxicating aroma of love and flowers, Alice took me by the hand and walked me into the tall building that towered before us. Once inside, she introduced me to the 4 others she was living with. 5, I guess. There was Wilbur, a lanky teen with sandy blonde hair, his girlfriend Mary, who was about 10 years his senior, with her beautiful brown eyes and vibrant rose lips, Jeremiah, who was about my age at the time, but seemed to be so much older, and Junk. Junk was only a little younger than Alice, who must have been in her 20s at the time. Junk was skittish, but they were all very kind to me, and they all wore suits. The girls had skirts coming off their suits, with solid black leggings. Everybody had soft black suits with white gray undershirts, and ties that varied from shades of purple and blue. They welcomed me in a spectacular ceremony, and explained that I'd just entered a magical place, which they called Elysium. The 5th body was of a man climbing 30 years or more, named Jack. He didn't appear until after the welcoming ceremony. Everybody mostly referred to Jack as Sir or Father. His suit was the smoothest shade of black, and he wore shiny gold cufflinks. His undershirt was dark purple, and his tie was red. His hair was black and well gelled. The streaks of white and silver at the side of his head did not appear as an ancient feature, but as magnificent and distinguished. His emerald green eyes were like portals to another world. I felt as though I knew everything when I looked into them. I thought I felt that way because he had so much raw power. One could absorb some simply by looking into his eyes. He was an eccentric being, always making a spectacle when entering a room. Even when he remained silent, his presence was heavy and enlightening. His presence was that of a god. Even if you were blindfolded when Jack stood in the same room as you, you would know. You could feel him, watching, breathing, reading your mind. You could always feel him. My name was Kevin when I first arrived, but Jack dubbed me Abel. He named everyone, and he thought of everybody as his children. He called us his children. Jack took each of us from desperate times. Wilbur worked at his father's surf shop, somewhere far, far away. But he also worked in his father's drug trade. If Wilbur ever disobeyed his father, he would beat him and inject him full of something called heroin. This was apparently a means of keeping Wilbur from leaving, as his father's was the only place where he could get more of it. Wilbur said after having heroin once, you needed it all the time. Junk also lived a fair life of abuse. Jack found him after his principal had dumped him in a ditch and left him there for dead. Apparently, wherever it was that he attended, the entire school hated him, students and staff alike. They would call him Junk, so Jack told him to turn that weakness into a strength. And he made that his new name. It never quite had the effect Jack was hoping for. Or maybe it did. Wilbur and Junk were the only ones who dared to tell me about their lives before Jack. Speaking of a time before Jack was strictly prohibited because we didn't need anything else. Jack had been the only one to ever care about us. Nobody else would, and this is something he would remind us often. He told me once that he was to make sure we were never ungrateful. The whole house was my family, but Wilbur and Junk were my friends. My best friends, my brothers. Though Jeremiah and I did have our share of heart-to-hearts, and I'm pretty sure he wanted my head on a spike. I knew he'd have my back. He was my brother after all, and he would protect me, but maybe it was because he wanted him to be the only one allowed to hurt me. He and Jack. Jack and the others taught me that Elysium was a holy place, untouchable by those unworthy. They said that those with truly dark hearts saw nothing when they looked up at the building, or the property on which it stood. That to them it simply was not here. I'd heard vague descriptions of heaven in the past, which Jack said was close to Elysium, but not quite. Elysium was a place where lost souls could go, with their hearts still beating. A paradise for the broken, if you will. And once you die, your soul remains there. It simply traveled to a parallel plane of existence, invisible not only to wicked hearts, but anything that drew breath. However, Jack wasn't like us. He said he stood in both planes, that when we died and shifted to the next, he would greet us as the same spirit he's always been, but in a completely different form. He told us that our own appearances would be changed forever, details depending on the wavelengths of one's soul. We would take on our true forms. Jack's ability to see and exist in both planes explained why he would sometimes speak as if in a conversation with someone, despite us seeing nothing. Even when Jack thought none of us were around, this was him talking to those on the other side, in forms incomprehensible to those on the outer plane. Within my first week of living in Elysium, Jack professed to me that if he were capable of having favorites, I would be it. He said that he saw a lot of potential in me. Jer overheard this and never truly got over it. Jack had to be stern with me sometimes, beating me with his cane or taking me to the dark chamber. But compared to everyone else, I was always the golden child. I almost never stepped out of line. So I didn't really have the same experience at Elysium as everyone else. Apparently, whenever Jack thought someone broke a very serious rule
or too many rules, he would come for you when you were alone and perform some mysterious act of horror upon you. Jack slept with everyone in Elysium as a way to bring our souls closer together. It was a horrifying thing to experience, every second of it terrible. But even so, they said this was not the mysterious punishment, nor was it the visits to the dark chamber. But as far as I was concerned, those were the two worst experiences to have in the house. It bewildered me to think that there was something even worse than the tortures that met you in the dark chamber. And to this day, I still don't have any details, or even a vague idea of the mysterious act. Whatever it was sometimes made people to want to leave, but they didn't. We all stayed because there was nowhere else to go. No one else to go to. Jack was all there was. He was our God, our home in heaven. Months after she disobeyed and experienced this mysterious horror, Alice told me something that nobody else had shared before. Because it was prohibited, she told me her name before Jack. It was Donna. Her friends used to call her Dawn or Donnie. She said sometimes she missed that name. She felt that when Jack changed her name, he changed who she was, and sometimes she didn't like that person. Not at all. Overall, Jack was kind to us. He took care of us, he fed us. We all ate together, we read together, and we bathed together every week. We were a family. We never left Elysium. The property was rather large, so we still went outside, but we never truly left. The only people who could leave the house were Jack and his butlers. Alice used to go out, in charge of finding new members. But one day, something happened, and that changed. Jack gave the job to Mary, but after a week he simply kept the duty to himself. He even stopped taking the butler, saying he could trust few. Over the years, a few more children were added, and it was great. Our family was growing. But when I was about 16, it seemed as though Jack was letting anybody with a shady past into our doors. There was no great selection, no light. He saw in them as he saw in me. He was simply recruiting. We started having larger ceremonies where Jack would explain how we were to live our lives in Elysium, and how evil and wretched the outside world was. How he was all we had and all we needed. I hated many of the new children, the ones let in because they had a shady past and a beating heart. They had no morals, no respect, no love. They would pick small groups and remain in them. They would ridicule anyone who wasn't a part of them. We were supposed to be a family, siblings, as though we shed blood, but that was no longer the case. Amari and Adriel were the worst of the bunch, the ringleaders of all the bad apples that had corrupted Elysium's holy basket. It was like they thought they were Jack. They looked like they were identical twins, even though Amari was a boy and Adriel a she-devil. But they were also lovers. Years ago, that would have disgusted me, but things like that became regular practice in Elysium. I was about 20 to 23 when we reached 40 or so members. I believe just below 40. I don't know exactly how old I was. because that's something we don't keep track of in Elysium. You are not to keep track of days, years, or months. You can recognize the seasons, but you cannot count them. Jack said this was because Elysium was eternity, and to try to know one's age was to deny and reject that eternity. But Alice had gifted me a calendar to hide. I would mark it almost every 2 moons, and we should try to celebrate my birthday when we had the chance. I was eternally grateful for this. I've always loved numbers, but I've never been able to count very high. When Jack found the calendar, Alice took the fall. It had trucks on it. February was a fire truck. I never saw Alice after that. I guess she disobeyed Jack one too many times and was sent off to Garnish. Garnish was where disloyal members went, those who were not worthy to bathe in Elysium's holy energy. Where this was, I didn't know, but nobody ever came back from Garnish, ever. I loved Alice. She was like a mother to me, or an elder sister. I had many siblings, and I had my group of friends, but with Alice it was different. I'd always call her Donna in private, and she'd always call me Kevin in private. She was the only one. I loved Donna so much, but I always thought that Alice sounded prettier. Things were never the same after Jack sent Alice away, and with the new members I hardly saw Jack. Sure, I would see him speaking during ceremonies or sometimes during mealtime, but never one-on-one. He still called us his children, but it didn't feel that way anymore. No, things were different. I was different. I was growing tired of Jack ruling over Elysium. He didn't care about us anymore. I knew he didn't. I was tired of living in Elysium. I've always been told that the world outside was where the devil ruled, and my few memories of childhood definitely supported that, but so what? Who's to say Jack was not the devil? Could God and Satan not be one and the same? He who could exist on 2 planes was surely capable of wearing more than one face. The cleansing began when Amara spoke ill of Alice. I thought I'd heard it before, but it was always in a crowded area, so I could never be sure. This time it was in the quiet hall just before our chambers. He called me scum, and said that Alice was a whore who strayed from Jack's path and deserved to suffer in Garnish. I grabbed a fistful of hair and crashed the blonde fool's head over the hall window. Noise didn't matter. Nobody was to leave their chambers at this light. Only Jack could, and his chambers were on the other side of Elysium. I grabbed a shard of glass and cut his throat. He gurgled at me with teary eyes, and I prayed to Alice. I remember in the beginning I was very keen on covering my trails. I didn't want to know how such an act would be treated by Jack, or the other members for that matter. Order was lost. These new members were clear agents of chaos. I used to think that such fools didn't deserve to bask in Elysium, but as I went on with the cleansing, I wondered if Elysium had not been Garnish all along. I soaked up the blood with the sheets and threw them in the furnace. I could not throw Morris in along with them because not only was I unsure if it would completely burn his bones or not, regular maintenance of the furnace was kept, and somebody would be checking up on it just before the day rise. So I wrapped Morris in more sheets. We had so many. Jack said it was in preparation for a growing family, and placed him outside in Elysium's court. One thing Jack teaches you is how to be one with the animals. I called a bird to my hand and broke its neck. I threw it up into the windows I'd broken with Amari and carried on. I got a shovel from the green room and dragged Amari to the woods. I dug for many breaths, of which I lost count, and buried the bastard under the dirt. I'd cut my hand on the piece of glass I used on Amari's. It bled and screamed agony as I dug and I buried, but Jack had taught me that pain was only in the mind. I was on a mission, I had to carry it out. While walking through the woods, I spotted a stick protruding from the earth. I found the stick curious because it was bright orange. How strange, I thought, so I dug the area around the orange stick, unsure of what I would find. What I did find was a woman, decaying with worms and maggots wriggling around in the remains of her flesh. I gifted Alice a green tie once. I found it while wandering in the field. I liked the color green, and I thought she deserved some individuality. This upset Jack, of course, but at the same time, he was still partial to me and let it slide. This woman had on that tie, as I'm sure you've guessed. The woman I found was Alice. I did some more walking and found a rather large area littered with orange sticks. I had found garnish. I had to ditch my bloodied suit, walking back to Elysium in nothing but my shoes and my briefs. Of course I had extra suits, but only so many. I prayed Jack would not count them, because I couldn't think of a good reason why one should be missing. When night became day, I helped the butlers clean up the glass, and used one of their shots to reopen the wound on my hand, so it wouldn't seem suspicious. Nobody thought the better of it. Nobody but Adriel. Many assume Amari had simply abandoned Elysium, and Jack saw him dishonored. He even held a ceremony about it, but she was not convinced. In fact, his disappearance drove her mad. She would not shut up about foul play, not until Jack ordered her to. Adriel became a silent being after that. Despite this fact, I decided she was next. She got on my nerves, and though she seemed innocent now, I knew she was still pulling the strings on Elysium's bad apples. I've never heard whispers of a mutiny. If anybody was gonna take that bastard, Jack, down, it was gonna be me. But first, I had to destroy what he created. The story of Adriel's demise isn't really one of much interest. She was in the green room and I beat her to death with a hammer. Simple as that. I didn't even say anything. Didn't feel anything either. Not even rage. It was just a minor chord. The only interesting and right-worthy things about it were some memories flooded back during the act. I'm still unsure exactly what brought me to the streets as a child, but I do remember what happened to my mother. My father started having me make his meals. I made him 4 dishes before I doused one with rat poison. When my mother caught me with the box of poison in one hand and my father's plate in the other, she threatened my life. Instinctively, I reached for the closest object on the counter behind me, and I beat her head in with a meat tenderizer mallet, just as I beat Adriel.
I know it's not very interesting. I've never been a good storyteller. But it was nice to have at least one happy memory from my childhood. From Kevin's childhood, I should say. The cleansing couldn't wait after that. I didn't want a slow process. I wanted blood and death. I decided I would simply burn the building to the ground with everyone inside. But before I could do so, I still had a few chores. My intent was to tear down everything Jack had created. That included my family and my friends. I decided I would go to Junk first. Jer and Wilbur got stronger than we had first met, but Junk never really changed that much. I knew physically he would be the easiest. My friends deserved more than just burn away in that place. They deserved something better, closer, more personal. I did love them, I really did. Junk often liked to prepare the family's meals, so I offered to help him. It did occur to me that I could poison the children of Elysium as I tried with my father, but that would taint my final moments with Junk. He was always a dear friend to me, and I loved him like a brother, a real brother. He snuck out with me that night so we could watch the stars, a favorite pastime that we hadn't done in quite a while. I guess things just got too busy for the both of us with all the new members. We sat together on the grass, just staring at the night sky. I asked him if he knew how much he meant to me. He didn't know the extent, so I told him. We cried. He stood up to give me a proper hug. I held him tight, as if the breeze would blow him away. I retrieved the discreet kitchen knife I swiped earlier that day and drove it into his back. His last word was a whisper. He asked me, "Why?" I looked at him for a second and put my hand over his shoulder, unable to answer. I wanted the embrace to last, but I knew it couldn't. I drove the blade in further, and it gave a twist. He fell to my feet, and I opened his neck just to be sure. He didn't need to suffer any more than he already had. I buried him next to Alice. I'd stolen a can of green paint from the storage room, and gave them 2 green sticks crossing into X's. I planned to kill Wilbur next, but at this point Mary was pretty old, so I went with her instead. Jeremiah and Wilbur were the strongest, so they were the last. I waited for Wilbur to leave their chamber to run an errand for Jack. I slipped into the room expecting her to be in bed, but instead she was bathing. They had their own bathroom. I didn't have my own bathroom. I had to share a chamber with 6 others, and these 2 were with their own private chamber and their own private bathroom. What a world. She heard me walking and I called out. She thought I was Wilbur. I told her I appreciated how she was mostly kind to me in my life. She screamed and I had to drown the old broad in her own filth. Such a dishonorable death, I know, but I was only working with what the world gave me at the time. I put about 8 moons or so of space in between the disappearances. It seemed less suspicious that way. At least that's how I thought of it. I guess I was a semi-flawed plan because I never really did cleanse Wilbur. 6 moons after Mary's death, Wilbur hung himself off the balcony with his belt. Elysium became very unsettled after that, and people started to notice the disappearances. I didn't only kill my family personally. There were others that I cleansed out of the sheer opportunity, but none of them mattered. I won't even write their names, much less how they died, because they were nothing less than nothing to me. The fear going on around Elysium was like electricity in the air. I think there were ceremonies explaining how these disappearances were holy acts, but I stopped attending those. I feared I may lose control and simply jump up on the podium and beat Jack to death before he could watch his empire fall. I found Jeremiah in the food court by himself, and it wasn't even mealtime. He was crying. I've only seen him cry twice before. Such an ugly sight, heartbreaking. When he saw me, he was hesitant, but he allowed me to sit, and we spoke for many breaths. It was just me and him now. We were the only ones left in our family. We knew there were others before us. Mary spoke of the many who were off to garnish even before she arrived, but the 6 of us were a real family. I decided it would be easiest to cleanse Jeremiah the way I had Junk. I could feel the blade in my pocket, but I only needed the conversation to last a little longer. This was the last of my family. I needed it to last, but he got up for a hug and I felt a pain strike my heart. At least he could die like his brother. He pulled me in for an embrace and we stood there for a good moment. When I reached for the blade, he caught my movement. He questioned me, so I needed to be quick. I swung for his spine, but he grabbed my arm and headbutted me, instinctively breaking my nose. He began a frantic apology, but his eyes would not leave the blade. He put it together, clever punk. I tried to explain what I was doing needed to be done. I needed to cleanse the world and all of us of Jack's plight, but he thought me insane. It's funny. I think in the false book, Abel is the brother who is murdered, not the brother that murders. I fought Jeremiah to the best of my abilities, but despite our shared age, it was superior. I lay propped against the meal bench, his food on my chest, and the blade held above his head. I was sure this was my end, but a cruelly comedic turn of events. Jack entered the meal hall. He shouted for Jer to stop. Jer just told Jack that he didn't understand and I needed to die. He swung the blade down towards me, and just as I expected my fate, a loud boom shocked me to my core. It stopped my heart and my breath. I had never heard such a piercing sound. Jared dropped the blade and fell to the floor. There was a hole in his back. Jack stood pointing with his strange metal object. Could that small thing have been what caused such a monstrous sound and brought my brother to such a quick demise? It seemed absurd, but there was no other explanation. Jack really was a being separate from humans. No mortal could wield such power. He needed to be taken down. But what other abilities could he hold? It occurred to me that I really didn't know anything about Jack at all, but it didn't matter. Though it sickened my heart, I told Jack Jer had made an attempt on my life, and in doing so, he admitted to me that he was the cause of the recent disappearances, that he was trying to cleanse the corrupted Elysium and tear down all that Jack had built. There was no reason not to believe me. Now my time was out. I needed to rid the world of Elysium once and for all. Unfortunately, I still had to wait 3 moons. I still wanted Jack to be the last alive, so I had to wait for him to go into town for supplies. Some of the newcomers believed he didn't leave at all, that he just made the supplies appear with his great magic. But I knew better. The fox only left at night when everybody was bound for their chambers by his command. The second he left, I got to work. I sealed all the exits and stuck sticks I sharpened into the ground below any glass windows, so anyone who tried to escape by breaking them would be impaled. Barbaric, I know. I lined the halls with gasoline from the storage room and flammables and waited on the front steps for Jack. When I saw his hearse at the end of the road driving back towards Elysium, I tossed my match and watched my home of many years go up in a beautiful cleansing flame. Everybody died, everybody burned, and everybody died. They were all cleansed by my hand. May Ganesh revel in my victory. I attempted to take Jack by surprise. As he stood staring at my flames helplessly, I lunged and caught my blade straight in his shoulder. He fought and he was strong, but he was old. I was going to give him a slow death, but he reached into his suit, and again I heard the impossibly loud noise that claimed Gare. There was a hole in my left eye. I stood staring in bewilderment at it and fell to my knee. His magic had pierced me. He was confused. The old man demanded an explanation. I grabbed a large rock and struck him across the face. The noise. There was a hole in my right arm. I threw the rock at his knee and crawled quickly over to him. I grabbed the rock with my left hand and crawled the distance. I bashed his withered old skull until I was hitting nothing but dirt. I had finally cleansed all his sin. I had won. Almost. There was still one more thing to do, but first I had to mend my wounds. I planned for his magic. I hid medkits in the area if I need them, and I did, very badly. I stopped the bleeding and bandaged my wounds. I took the hearse and drove away from Elysium, away from Ganesh. When I was young, Jack taught me how to drive the hearse, never going too far from Elysium. If not for those lessons, I would have succumbed to my own injuries and died on the way back to town. In preparation for this fiasco, I stole money from Jack's chamber and put it in some of those medkits. When I got into town, I purchased the chamber in a small building called Motel, with pen and papers from the man who ran Motel, and got to work. I haven't written in some time, so I hope it's still legible. This tale had to be told. The tale of Elysium, of Jack, and his personally designed Antichrist. Whoever finds this, share this with the rest of your world. Let them know what went on in your backyard. I guess this is too long to be a suicide note, so think of it as a chronicling to a blistering fall. My final act will be cleansing the world of my own life. I would like to continue living, might be okay with that, and maybe the world would accept Kevin on its own. But Kevin died with Alice. He's in the dirt laying beside the beautiful Donna and his family marked by green in the great Ganesh. Abel was a creation of Jack, and so he must fall. May a better Elysium find you. Sincerely, Abel.
I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, it helps the channel a lot. See you next time.